Hi, welcome to this D5 render video. In the upcoming 30 minutes or so, I'm going to show you what makes D5 render such an amazing and powerful tool to work with. We're going to go through materials, the scatter tool, and how to use AI to complement our work and to create beautiful renders with. Now, if you're just as excited as I am, then let's jump right in. Now, before we get started, I want to show you what we are going to create. As you can see, I got this really exciting scene going on here, and this is what we are going to work on. Now, let me turn everything back to the beginning. Alright, this looks like a good starting point for us to start working on our scene. Now, I've imported my model using the D5 render plugin for Vectorworks. With the plugin, I can live sync directly to D5 render. You can use SketchUp, 3D Studio Max, Revit, Rhino, ArchiCAD, Blender, and C4D also as a live sync plugin or as a sync plugin depending on the software that you're using. With that said, let's get started. I want to start off by applying some materials to my scene. Now, to do that, I can go to my asset library at the top left corner and select one of the 2000 materials that I have available. I could also, of course, use my own materials that I have downloaded or that I've made in Vectorworks or any other software. Now, first off, I want to start here because I want to use a special wood material here, and I'm going to select the surface, click on it, and adjust my map settings to the material or the texture that I've downloaded. Basically going to click on the first option that I have and click on dark wooden planks. Gonna open it and you immediately set it that it gets applied. Now I do want to rotate this 90 degrees. Perfect. And I'm gonna adjust the color a bit because I don't want this to be basically red. Now, as you have noticed, this is a bit too small. So let's scale this and make this a bit bigger. And to make my own life easier, because as you can see, we are currently seeing that, let me adjust the camera a bit. We're currently seeing that the color of our ground texture is reflecting on our texture here, which kind of makes things look weird. So now with that texture applied, I'm just going to adjust the texture right here by going to Assets, going to my favorites because I've already added a few favorites to make everything much easier. I'm going to apply it right here and give D5 render a bit of time to adjust. And we immediately see that we have our own texture, we have a D5 render material, but our material kind of looks flat and it's missing a ton of details. Now I could of course add the normal maps, the displacement, the ambient occlusion maps that I've downloaded, but I want to do things different. I want to use the AI tool that D5 render has, click on it, and it will automatically generate all the additional details for me. And you immediately see that everything looks as it should. We got the right roughness, the right specular, and the right ambient occlusion. So just like that, you can add a material from D5 render or import your own. With that said, let's quickly apply all the other materials and continue. We're almost there. Last but not least, let's add some glass. To do that, I'm going to select my glass panels here, go to Materials, click on Transparent, and we see that we have turned it into a glass material. And voila, we're done. We've added most of our materials. Now, there are a few more things that we can do. Like, for example, if we look at this metal, it really has sharp edges. And this is something that breaks immersion when you're looking at a 3D scene. So by selecting this and clicking on Round Corners, you can round the corners and make it look much more detailed than it is. And we can immediately see the effect that our light has on our material. Okay, with our materials done, let's continue to the next phase. So something that makes D5 render such a cool program to use is the fact that you don't have to overcomplicate it. There are so many tools available to make your life easier, and I want to show you a few of them. Now, if I go to my asset library, I can of course use one of the 11,000 models available. I'm sorry, I had to take a moment because it's a lot. Now, what I want to do is show you a few of these models and show you the traditional way of doing stuff. So we are basically going to go to our interior scene here. And I'm going to close this for a moment and put this on fly and basically fly to my scene. Going to go back to assets and going to go to indoor and furniture and maybe select a sofa, right? So initially you were used to placing sofas even as an architect working on an exterior scene. And this is something which is really time consuming as a designer because you don't want to spend time on an interior if it's not your job. So what can you do? Initially, you would have placed a sofa and a few hundred other assets. You would have turned them, maybe added a few lights if I go to the top. So a few spotlights maybe here and there. And you would fill your scene like this. And as you can see, I've spent maybe 1 minute now and I've just placed the sofa and 2 lights and my scene doesn't look nice at all. And I still don't want to spend time on this because my focus as a designer for this project is the exterior scene. So how can we solve this? Well, there are a few tools that we can use. But first, before doing that, I'm going to go to my environment and I'm going to change the light to HDR, going to go to cloudy, and basically going to turn down the light a bit. So even though I've placed some lights in there, as you can see, they're not really popping. And my interior is not visible until I do a certain render. So what can I do to make this look nice without spending time? Well, simple. I go to the asset library, and instead of putting all these furniture and stuff that I don't need for this project, I go down, or up in this case, to my interior parallax and choose one of the multiple options that I have. Now, once again, to make life easier for myself, I've added a few to my favorites. So I'm going to place one to show you what I mean and what the power of interior parallax is. Going to move it up, going to move it to the background and put it in our building. Going to adjust it a bit. And just like that, if we were to fly around, we can see that we now have an interior without having to spend much time on it. And this just adds so much detail to our scene and saves us so much time that it's 100% worth doing so. Unless you really want to do the interiors, then by all means, be my guest. Let me go back to the asset library and go back to interior parallax, go to residential buildings and select a few more. So I'm going to select this. Or maybe this. And those that are downloaded can be immediately applied. I'm going to pick this one, going to place it in my scene, going to rotate, and we can see that this is a huge one, right? So maybe we want to have this somewhere here. And don't worry, you can always adjust the height and scale to make it fit within your design. At the end of the day, you basically want to show something, right? It's not about spending too much time on this because at the end of the day, you just want to have something for the interior scene that fills up your building. Great. And just like that, we have added an interior parallax to our project. Now, let me show you some more cool assets that D5 Render has. Now, we do have a fairly empty scene and we can do a few stuff. Of course, we can do the standard grass that every other package does, and I can show you how that looks. I'm going to select this. I'm basically going to go to custom, to grass, and voila, we have grass. You've seen this in other rendering software, right? It's nothing special. But I feel like we've been past this. It's 2024 right now, right? So let's see what we can do. I'm going to go back to custom. I'm going to leave this here. And I see that this is basically tiling. So let me fix that. Going to turn on randomizer and our tiling is gone. And this looks like a really cool grass-based texture. Now, I do want to do more with this. So I'm going to go to my asset library. Going to go to our scatter tab here, or category as I should say, and select one of the pre-made scatter tools. Now, there are a lot of options. Be careful because some are huge, some are smaller, but I just want to add some life to this area. I could choose one of the few, but I want to have the wild grassland. I'm going to click here and click on create. And before you know it, D5 Render is going to populate this mesh or this material with a whole organic looking grass. And this looks much and much better. Now, with that said, let me show you a few more cool elements that we can use. We can actually also use the scatter tool to fill in these kind of areas. So if I were to go to my asset library, I'm going to go to my materials first because I just want to adjust something here. Let me drop it on this. Okay. And we can see that we have these small, that we have these small spots that are now sharing all the same material. And I want to add some flowers or, grass foliage here without spending too time. So I'm going to go back to my scatter tool, going to go down a bit, and I can select a lot of options. But I just want to click on, let's see, I'm going to go for this. Going to click on it, click on create, and I'm going to update all these materials. And we are done. And just like that, I've added a ton of detail here without spending too much time. And I can adjust all of these individually if I want to. Now let me show you something else. I'm going to click on Wild Grassland, click once again there, and click on Create. And give D5 Render a bit of time to populate this area with plants that I want to have. As you can see, some of them are sticking out here. And we can basically select them and adjust them accordingly. And we could actually even turn them off if we want to. So I'm going to select these and click on detach and move them backwards. All right. And this gives us full control over everything that we have in our scene, even though it can be applied within seconds. Now let's do this on a much, much larger scale, because we also have a background and we want to do something with that. I'm going to go back to my assets, going to go to model, going to go to basic model, click on plane, place it in my scene, and going to scale this and make this really big. All right. I'm going to bring it more to the background because we basically want to have it in the background. And I might even say that I might want to have it something like this. All right. And what I can do now is go back to my asset library, to the scatter tool, go to maybe mountain forest or wetland with bunches trees, but I'm going to go for mountain forest. Click on it, click on the object that we just created, and let D5 Render populate it. Now we're going to lose our house for a few seconds. But the cool thing about the scatter tool is that once again, you have full control. This also means that you can cull areas. So by selecting this, I can tell D5 Render like, hey, I want you to not be visible in these areas. Can you remove the trees there? Let me just select a few more parts and we should be good to go. Now, depending on how you set this up, you can do it quickly or, take your time with it. Great. So we have added a ton of trees and details within a few seconds. Let me also add one more ground layer here to really spice things up. I'm going to select the wet waterside shrubbery and I'm going to add it once again here. Click on create. And we now have a lot of grass. And once again, we can use the cull effect to create and remove it wherever we don't need it. And that's that. And just to show you how much freedom you have, I'm going to add another grass texture by going to materials on top of this. So we have a grass texture, we have a scatter layer, and we have one more scatter layer on top. And this is such a freedom when you're working on a large area or on a scene where you want to add multiple layers without having to worry like, is it possible or not? Yes, with D5 Render, it is possible. Okay, cool, great. I'm going to go back to my viewport. I'm going to place my camera right here. I'm going to update my scene. And as you've noticed, my light has been reset. That's because I forgot to update my scene after I've adjusted my environment. So I'm going to do that again. Going to make things a bit darker. And going to adjust my scene and maybe even make the scene a bit colder. We could also add some things like fog, etc. But for now, this is fine. So we've just noticed how easy it is to place assets. Maybe if you want to place a sofa, place objects such as interior parallax, which you can also control. Like if I were to go here, I can adjust the light intensity and bring that way down. And also here way down. To create realistic looking scenes without spending too much time. Okay. All right. So I've shown you how to use materials, how to place assets, even though we didn't want to use that sofa, and how to use the scatter tool to bring your scene to life. Something that we didn't check out much is the AI toolset. We used it to create materials, but I want to show you what you can do more with it. Now, there are a few options when it comes to AI, and I believe that AI should always be complementary to your work. It should never be a replacement of you and your creativity. So D5 really empowers you in that regard. Let me start off with the most simple element. I'm going to go to this Text to 3D button, and we can basically use Text to 3D to type something and have it create assets for us. So for example, outside furniture made out of wood, face for living room, or a box for moving stuff made out of wood. You can continue refining this till you find what you want, and there are a lot of examples that you can use in your scene. Once you have an asset, you basically just download it and you can add it to your scene once it's fully loaded. Like that. I'm going to zoom in just to show you how that looks like. So I simply created this by typing a prompt and have D5 Render created for me. These are empowering tools. These are not replacements. Another one of these is when it comes to effects post-processing. Everyone I know who is an architect or designer is usually not a photographer or a filmmaker. They don't really focus on stuff such as LUTs, exposure, highlight local exposure, etc. You basically want to get this right, and you could use some help. To do that, D5 Render has a really cool tool. Let's say you found this image online and you want to replicate the light settings and the exposures of this. You could play around with all the post-processing effects and the light and the LUT to create that. But you could also tell D5 Render like, hey, can you basically help me out with this? By clicking on the AI atmosphere match, selecting an image, this one, snapping it to our current view and saying, hey, D5 Render, start generating this for me, and applying it, we will see that our scene is going to get updated and adjusted based on the uploaded reference image that we just added. And these are powerful tools that help you to work faster. I don't believe AI is going to replace your creativity, but I believe that AI is an excellent solution in empowering you and making you work faster. It's like the perfect assistant to have. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and we can't wait to have you as part of the D5 Render family.